Another session of the Energize and Thrive Summit, helping people 30 and over and burnout for good. Our next speaker starting right now. Take it away, Molly.
All right. Well, thank you guys again for joining us. I'm back with you. I'm Molly, and I get the privilege to welcome our next speaker, Dr. Andre. He is I'd like to welcome to the stage, a social psychologist, business consultant, and innovative expert whose groundbreaking work has been helping leaders and organizations rethink the way they manage stress and performance. He's also creator of Burnout, I believe, Banish Burnout framework and pioneer of the spherical thinking, which he's going to be talking a little bit about some of this today. Let's give a really warm welcome to Dr. Andre. Welcome for being, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Molly. It's my pleasure.
So good, so good. All right, so Dr. Andre, just a little bit. Tell us where you're coming in from, because I mentioned I love your accent.
Thank you. Well, I live in Reno, Nevada. I'm
Okay.
actually in Northern California at the moment,
Mm,
but yeah, I've lived and worked in 7 different countries and
wow.
visited another 20. And I of all those places, I just love the area that I'm in.
Okay.
I get a wake up to a beautiful view of the Sierra
Woo.
Nevadas, and we've got a nice variety of climate and so forth. So I really love it there.
Oh, that's so good. Well, I know one thing I did leave out wanted to mention in your introduction is you've also been a TED Talk speaker. So kind of talking about your area of expertise, if you want to just introduce us a little bit to what it is you'll be talking about today.
Yeah, sure. My sort of underlying passion really is creativity. Well, there are 3 strands of my DNA. One is business. I spent 15 years taking 3 of my crazy ideas to become world leaders in their field.
So good.
Um, so medical ultrasound items, and then also a piano microphone.
Oh,
In the last few years of his life, Frank Sinatra wouldn't go on stage unless my mics were on his piano. So that
wow.
was so business is one strand of my DNA.
Okay.
Um, and then the other is creativity. I had 2 extraordinarily creative parents. My dad was actually became a world-renowned artist. My highly creative, he was 60 actually when I was born, and my highly creative mother was 25, And that is sort of one illustration of the fact that people who are very creative often have very loose connections to social norms.
Mm,
Social norms are sort of a little bit of a guideline, a loose
yeah.
thing that you may or may not decide to follow. I mention that because it's relevant to what I'll be talking about later.
Yeah.
And I was actually in high school. I was all physics and maths and applied maths and all this kind of stuff. And then my first job was as a graphics designer for a publishing company. Go
Mm,
figure.
yeah.
So that was, and then in my 20s, I started inventing things. So creativity has been a very important sort of part of my life.
Sounds like
And
it.
then the third strand really is teaching, coaching, and things of that nature. Um, I used to actually to be a scuba instructor, but after at the end of my entrepreneurial part of my life, I went back to school and got a PhD in social psychology.
Wow.
And following that, I did a lot of coaching. I'm actually still the visiting professor of creativity and entrepreneurship.
Mm,
And in the early days of that, I was coaching people like organizations like the Virgin Group, Smithsonian, Welsh
wow.
Government, NASA. And it was all about helping those organizations become more innovative.
Wow.
So you can see the 3, and then other teaching was at the university and various other things. But so those 3 are really combined together to do what I do now,
So
with a
good.
major focus on creativity and creative thinking. And actually, my TED talk is very much focused on that.
Yeah.
And it's in terms of burnout, it's
Yeah.
particularly interesting. People don't think about creative thinking
Well,
in
that's
connection with things like burnout, but it's
yeah. So
very
I
relevant.
think I'd love for you to kind of expand on that a little bit. How does creativity and burnout seem related? Because I don't know. I can't. I'd like to better understand the connection there.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting connection. Firstly, I think people have a tendency to trivialize creativity, or creative thinking, I should say.
Okay.
In other words, it's not something in the forefront of their mind. I mean,
Yeah.
if you ask somebody, what's important for somebody in this particular job, they might be talking about analytical thinking, deductive thinking. They're
Mm.
never really talking about creative thinking.
Mm.
But one of the interesting things, and I kind of started to work on this notion of spherical thinking, where you're using the whole mind, the analytical, deductive parts and the creative parts. Started to really work on that sort of 20, 25 years ago. And interestingly, over the past kind of 10 or 15 years, studies in fMRI imaging, and for those people who don't know what that is, that's functional MR. We all know what MRI is. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to take
Mm-hmm.
a cross section of your body and photograph it. Well,
Mm-hmm.
fMRI is real time. So
Uh,
you can have somebody focused on their head and ask them to think different things, and you
mm-hmm.
will actually see parts of the brain, different parts of the brain light up
Mm.
as they think these different things. And that it's interesting because it really has validated this notion that we have two distinct ways of thinking.
Mm.
We can think either deductively or analytically. And if you think about that, that's a very focused process. If you're thinking about something analytically, you're continually cranking up the microscope and
Mm-hmm.
looking at
Mm-hmm.
things in finer depth.
Yes.
And the other side of the other way of thinking is the kind of way of thinking that we had in the first few years of our life, where you've got a
Okay.
blank canvas,
Yeah.
and it's different. Not many people are going to remember those years. I gather there
No.
are a few people who can remember bits about that stuff. But so the parallel as an adult is if somebody teleported you to a totally different environment.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when my wife and I went to India and, we got into a taxi at Goa airport and, within minutes we were sort of weaving in and out of, elephants
Mm-hmm.
going down
Mm.
the
Wow.
street and things like. And so when you're in that kind of environment, your mind has to be very open. You're seeing things done in different ways. Wow, that's a different way of doing it, but it seems to work.
Yeah.
In other words, this is the ultimate learning practice. And if you think about that in terms of when we're 1, 2, 3 years old, we've got, a heck of a learning curve to go through in a small length of time.
Uh-huh.
So this process of having your mind open is very divergent.
Okay.
So relating that to burnout, anxiety, stress,
Yeah.
and I know this from, having worked with a lot of clients in that sort of area and just seen people, it's a very having burnout, for instance, is a very convergent process.
Oh, gotcha.
You don't see the options. I call it the
Mm-hmm.
hamster wheel effect.
Yes.
It's just you're very focused on your immediate distress
Mm-hmm.
and the things that are causing it and so forth. But you don't have the light at the end of the tunnel. You can't even find the tunnel. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
and so the nice thing about creative thinking is that because it's so divergent,
Mm-hmm.
it helps people get out of that convergent process.
Okay.
So, the various things that we do to encourage divergent thinking
Mm-hmm.
are going to get people out of that process. And it's incredibly effective with burnout.
Okay.
One of my, when I was beta testing my Banish burnout program, one of my clients had been going to therapy for 18 months. And he said after 6 weeks, I can't believe I'd ever get back to this stage. I mean,
Wow.
it's just a wonderful feeling. And,
Wow.
it is such this process of going into a sort of divergent thinking
Yeah.
process is so powerful. And the reason it's powerful is that you're not trying to change somebody's way of thinking. You're
Okay.
creating a new way of thinking.
Okay.
And it is a distinctly new neural pathway.
And we know this
So
because of the imaging that shows that it's a new part of your or a different part of your brain that's being highlighted. That's
absolutely.
interesting. So
And
someone
it's a
like
little,
myself who is an analyzer, I do analyze hard situations, life, circumstances. What is the approach you would say to start tapping into that creativity, to kind of step out of that analytical focus burnout mode?
well, there are a number of things. I mean, very specific. In my programs, I actually
Mhm.
create a custom package for somebody just in the first session,
Okay.
and we work on the three R's. We work on recreation, we work on relationships, and we work on
Oh,
responsibilities.
I love it. Love it.
Now that all gets fairly, and those are the three areas really where people with burnout have difficulties. You know, one of the
Yeah.
things, relationships tend to suffer
Yeah.
instantly, and to some, at work and at home, for most people with burnout. And so that's an important thing. Recreation, goes by the board. I mean, it's like sort of, well, what do you do for recreation? Well, I used to play, yeah, no, I don't care about what you used to do. What do you do now?
What do you do
And
now?
all that stuff disappears because
Yes.
people get into a burnout mode because of this hamster wheel.
Mm.
They tend to just think that the solution is to work more.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so then you've got responsibilities, and responsibilities is really analyzing what is it that you are really responsible for.
Mm.
Because let's ditch the ones that you're not. If you're
Okay.
if you're taking responsibilities that other people should be taking, or that you suddenly feel you've got to be a caregiver for everyone in the world, or whatever it is, let's really analyze that and get down to the really essential things that are important to it. So that's in the program, but in just as a sort of way of getting involved in creative thinking, there are a lot of different ways of doing that.
Mhm.
The first and the simplest is going for a walk. There's
Mm.
certain things happen in the brain that the corpus callosum, which joins the two hemispheres of the brain,
Mhm.
that expands if you do something like going for a walk. If you use a
Wow.
physical exercise that doesn't require much cognitive effort.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm told, I've no experience of this, but I'm told that the same thing's true of vacuuming, But anyway, that's so doing something like that. So,
Okay.
going on a bike or hiking or whatever, especially if you
Physical.
can do
Move
it
your body.
absolutely
Yeah.
in a way that doesn't require you to think about it.
Okay.
And, so if you that has quite a significant impact, especially if you can do it somewhere where you're surrounded by nature.
Mm.
That has been found to have positive impact. So that's one thing. The second thing is, just force yourself to get back to something recreational.
Yeah.
One
Okay.
of my clients used to play pickleball, and when he got back into pickleball, he said it was great because it was the one time in the week I didn't have to worry about whatever it was he was worrying about.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Shut the
that
mind
for
off.
me, it's tennis. If I get on the tennis court, everything else disappears. And
Okay.
then, okay, some of it comes back when I finish playing tennis, but it comes
Yeah.
back because after I've had that chance to think about things in a broader sort of way.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of things like that. Relationships, people with burnout will often be self-destructive in the sense
Mhm.
of becoming distanced from those very people that could help them. Their wife,
True.
their family, their husband, their, whoever.
The coworker.
And at
Yeah.
work, that they will start to sort of step away. And of course, at
Yeah.
work, when people start to do that, most of the time you give them the space. You say, okay,
Yeah.
when I had burnout towards the end of my entrepreneurial career, it was major burnout. I mean, there was a couple of things that coincided in my life that really made it seem as if doom was about to strike.
Yeah.
And there was one person
Mm.
who resisted. Everybody else, I said, look, I'm really busy at the moment. I just can't really deal with
Mm.
seeing people right now. And
Yeah.
there's one guy that, I'd say that, and then the following day, he's at my front door, knocking on the door, saying, "Hello, Andre, just wanted to say hello." He wouldn't let go. He wouldn't let
Persist.
me do that.
Yes. Cared enough
And
about you. Yeah.
absolutely. And he gave me a piece of paper with a phone number on it. He said, "Look, I just want you to, she's a good friend of mine. I just want you to call her. She's a meditation teacher."
Mm.
And I did. And she was a TM instructor. And so I learned to transcendental meditation.
Okay.
And we're talking an embarrassing number, well, 40 years ago now. And I have been doing that ever since.
Oh,
And
so good.
so, as Jack was talking about before, in the session before this, it was incredibly powerful. I mean,
Mm.
one of the things that disappears with burnout is the ability to sleep well. And of
Yeah.
course, that's fundamental to your well-being, isn't it?
Fundamental. Oh my gosh, so good.
And after the first of the three training days with TM, that was the first good night's sleep I'd had for years,
Wow.
literally years. And so, I said, okay, this is it. I'm going to push ahead with this, and I always have done. And it's my go-to, for all kinds of difficulties. I mean, 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer,
Oh
and I
my gosh.
faced, 3 years of radiation treatment and
Wow.
surgery and various other things. And it was my go-to practice for getting through it. And
Yeah.
it was, and I was surrounded by people who were incredibly supportive and so on
Yeah.
and so forth. But, it was the one thing that helped me go through the mental change
Mm-hmm.
of the fact that, I was not 25 anymore, and,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to act as if I'm, staggeringly old, but I do have to face the facts that I have limitations. And that was a very, very difficult process.
Mm-hmm.
Meditation was very powerful for that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other techniques that I use in my Banish Burnout, because creative thinking can basically, because of its divergent nature, it can give you a broader view of the world. You make
Mm.
better decisions. And those neural pathways, by the way, are the same ones that relate to emotional intelligence.
Oh,
So it's a triple whammy plus.
yeah. Well,
So
and since burnout is, again, that's the topic of today, and how to overcome it and how to uh that everyone deals with it. One thing I did want to point out was these practices, because burnout's not something you just experience once, and so it sounds like in your lifetime you've experienced it multiple times in different situations. And same for me, like there's been different times of burnout and sometimes to different degrees, but how this can come into play and honing in these techniques and the tapping into the creativity and expanding on that. um well, it's just tools in our toolbox for the different life circumstances that will inevitably happen.
yeah,
That is part of life.
I,
The
I absolutely it is. There is one more thing that I think is important to
Yes, please.
point out. As but burnout is not really accepted by the medical profession as being a uniquely identifiable um,
Yeah,
problem, and
yeah,
that, but it's subsumed under the word workplace stress.
yeah.
And I just want to mention one thing about stress. Stress is defined in a lot of different ways. I define stress as what occurs when you do not have the resources to meet a challenge.
Ooh, that is beautiful.
And the reason I define it that way is that, if you think about just sort of a piece of wood, an old wooden ruler or something like that,
Mm-hmm,
and you put a weight on one end, it will bend. Well,
mm-hmm,
it is technically being stressed.
mm-hmm,
And we're stressed by everything that we have to do. Now,
mm-hmm.
stress in itself is not negative.
Yes,
It's a function of living. I mean,
yes,
if you don't stress, then basically you're a vegetable. I mean, you've got
yeah,
stress is a part of life.
yeah,
So it's only a problem when you don't have the resources to deal with that stress.
yeah.
And so what that's doing is that shifts the onus of um, control from the environment to you. You share that responsibility for what you're going through. The
Mm,
environment causes you the stress. I say
mm-hmm,
the environment, it could be the work, it could be home, or whatever, the external source.
mm-hmm,
That's a stressor.
mm-hmm,
But you're having the ability, the resources to deal with that stress is
mm-hmm,
the other side of burnout. So
mm-hmm.
there are things that you can personally do that will enable you to cope with the stressors in the environment you're in. I mean, sometimes you can get out of that environment, and sometimes you can't immediately.
Right, right,
If you're in the
absolutely.
middle of a family disaster or something, it's not, there are things you may be able to do, but in general,
Mm-hmm,
you might have to be looking internally as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important concept because you can have an environment and a person, and they come to me and say, "Okay, I've got burnout," and you say, "Well, what's changed? Why didn't you come to me a year ago?"
Hmm.
And they say, "Well, I really didn't have burnout then. Nothing had changed. Then they're not
Yeah.
under any more stress anymore from that particular environment.
Yeah.
Something has changed that now causes you not to have the resources."
Hmm. But yeah.
So you've got that personal responsibility to be looking internally as well as externally. And that's how you get this swift recovery from burnout, is
Mhm.
by tackling both of those situations at the same time.
And I would almost take that one step further to say that burnout is something, especially in the workplace, but through life too, in relationships and just, I guess not just the workplace, anywhere in life. Sometimes recognition from an outside party it could be the first recognition. Like sometimes we don't recognize our own burnout. We've gotten to that, reached that level of burnout, but someone else might recognize it. So in especially people we
Yeah.
care about or people that we work around, to recognize it and point it out that they might be approaching the steps of burnout. And like you said, stress is inevitable. That's a good stress, bad stress. But when it starts compounding and leads to burnout, if we recognize it in someone else saying something early on, can probably help mitigate that in a lot earlier and maybe more thoroughly.
Absolutely. In the freebie that I'm giving the audience
Yes,
today,
yes, let's talk about that.
you've got a survey, a score with a score and a way
Okay.
to interpret that score, and that can help not just the reader, but that somebody can use that to help somebody else.
Okay.
I'd say, just as a matter of interest, I know you're going through tough times, but if you were to have a look at this and answer these questions, what would your score be?
So let's,
And so, that, and
yeah.
the other thing that it does is there's a whole list of symptoms there. Now, not
Okay.
everybody has all those symptoms,
Right.
um, but most of those symptoms are associated, in the context of somebody having burnout. So,
Yeah.
and then there are some more general conversation about what to do about it and that kind of thing. So I hope people
So
find that
good.
useful.
That is so good because sometimes people just need the words to be like, oh, I recognize that this person has
Yeah.
burnout, and being able to recognize those key elements. So good. And that's the free gift for everyone. Let's talk. I want to take a couple minutes though for you to be able to talk about your VIP gift that is you and I talked a little bit about it, but go ahead and expand on that. Sounds like people are going to be getting quite the treat.
Yeah, absolutely. My latest book, which has just become an international bestseller, I'm pleased to say,
Oh,
um,
so good.
has that's called Creative Thinking, a Coach's Perspective.
Oh,
And it's not solely for coaches, it's for anybody that's vaguely interested. Um, Chapter 6 of that book is all about stress, anxiety, and burnout.
so
And
good.
so I thought that would be a really useful thing to include there because
Oh,
it's, we're not talking about 2 or 3 pages here. It's quite a significant chapter. So,
yes.
people
Yeah.
might want to sort of take that in bite-sized bits. There's a lot of information there, but I hope they
Well,
find it useful. And
oh my
obviously,
gosh.
the
Yeah.
whole book itself, if they find it useful, might be, if you find that useful, you might consider having a look at the whole book because it gives the background to it. But just that is a standalone, um, really in-depth look at stress, anxiety, and burnout because they are three distinct things.
Well, and I'm just looking it over and it's you got so some of the highlighted parts of the chapter 6, stress and anxiety, the worry rut. Okay, we all seem to fall into that at one time or another. Circling the wagons, I love that metaphor. Teen years, so good. Does how many people, in their 30s are parents of teens, and starting to help with the stress management, the burnout that can accumulate during the teen years. So good mitigating stress and stress as the shared experience. Um, I can't wait to read it. So that is so excellent. All right. Well, in parting today, I do have a question for you. In what one sentence, if you could give a one piece of advice to someone who's either dealing with burnout or recognizing burnout in someone else, where would you direct them to, or what would you give them as a parting words?
Well, I think just starting to do some of the exercises that I mentioned. I think most critically, though, if somebody's sort of on the edge of thinking that they might have burnout, is really to try and step back. Step back. Stepping back is a way to get from that convergent thinking to divergent thinking. So take a step back, look at your life, compare it to, maybe 2 or 3 years ago when you were, feeling happy and content, and have a look at, some critical areas. Have things changed? Are you managing to get a decent night's sleep? Do you actually take care of, if some of your life depends on you, for instance, cooking for yourself or feeding, so do you in fact do that competently, or have we sort of slipped into, opening a packet of something and pouring hot water in it, and that's the end of it, And then have a look at your relationships. I mean, those friends that you had a few years ago, are they still close to you? Are you still talking to them? Are you still, managing to talk to people and get out and have conversations, and really just have a look at all the areas of your life that you perhaps looked at a few years ago. Maybe you had goals that you were, following. You were an excited early day entrepreneur or something like that, and now it doesn't feel quite the same way. And just, take a step back and have a look at all the areas of your life that I've talked about, and some others, and have a real sort of objective assessment as to whether or not there's an issue that you have to deal with there.
So good. I love it. I'm taking that to heart, and this has been so good. Dr. Andre, thank you so much for being on here and for just sharing some of your wisdom, your experience, and I look forward to speaking with you again in the future.
I look forward to it too, Molly. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
This has been another amazing